Thank you very much. So in the interest of time, Eben and I have put a bit of effort into capturing this demonstration flow in an environment that's already working. So if everyone just wants to strap in, it's quite quick. If you've got any questions, just fire them off into the panel and we'll answer these as we go along. And we can have a bit of a chat with the Q&A in roughly 30 minutes or so from now. So here we go. Alan, myself, will be playing the role of the cost control team, and Eben will be playing the role of the scheduling team on the P6. We're going to be using two systems in this demonstration, Primavera P6 for schedule and Aconex connected cost for the cost control engine. And across the first section, the planning and approved baseline, let's kick off with an understanding of how we would typically build out the schedule.
Thank you, Alan. Here we can see Oracle Primavera P6 EPPM, and what I have is the AACE Resort and Spa project. Let's go and expand this project. So what I have is the activities. So we are looking at the foundation, structure, the mechanicals, the HVAC, lifts, etc. So we have the project schedule. Let's zoom that in so that we can have a better idea of the whole network of this project, all the activities that we've got defined in the project schedule. So over to you, Alan.
That's great, Eben, thank you. So in a parallel activity on the other side of the fence, the cost control team would have been busy defining and understanding how they're going to measure the project from a cost and time and progress perspective. How do they bring all of that disconnected data into one single environment for everyone to use with a single source of truth? So the first thing that needs to happen is we need to define the level of detail and the structure in which we are going to manage the project. Now that breakdown structure can be a cost, it can be a work, it can be a product, it can be a scope breakdown structure. There's a number of different ways in which we could do that, and that's completely down to the project delivery team to decide upon how they want to do that. And once that's been decided upon, obviously they need to then code that out. And again, the codification standards that are used can be CSI, it can be NRMA, or it can be anything else that's been mandated by a governing or compliance authority, or it can just be the codification system that the particular project delivery team wish to use for that project. Okay, so inside the Aconex interface, you can see that I'm logged in as David Humphrey, and the company that I work for is Majestic. Across the top, we've got the Aconex modules that have been configured for this project. The project name itself is the AACE Resort and Spa, and we're currently inside the cost module. And when you load that up by default, we're taken into the cost worksheet to see the breakdown structure and the control accounts that we're using to manage this project. Now, this is a blank canvas, so the project has just been created. So quite literally, the very first step that a cost or a QS type of role would do at this point is to define the control account structure. Now we can do that by simply adding from the view itself and just starting to build out our structures here manually, but typically we would have this pre-configured and templated in an Excel spreadsheet, which is the easiest way to do that. So if we do that and click import, we'll see the that import now. And as you can see, we've got the breakdown structure, which is a simple level 1 for the purposes of this project, across the direct costs and typical owner type of profile, and then that collapses all the way down to the bottom, and we can see the main works for construction is based at the moment on build division. And you can see the codes that have been applied here. So each of these control accounts does of course have its own code, which is going to be very important when it comes to the synchronization. And at this point in time, we don't have any budgets or any dates that have come into the system yet. It's purely just the breakdown of how we're going to measure the project. So the next thing we would do now is actually give some continuity and tie-in between the cost management tool and the scheduling tool. And the way that we would do that in this particular configuration for this demonstration is using the pre-built integration between Oracle Primavera P6 and Oracle Aconex Connected Cost. And the way that we're going to do that for this one is to actually publish the control account codes into the P6 system so that the planning team on the scheduling team on the P6 side can actually pull those codes through and then start to assign those into the schedule itself. So the way that we'll do it now is just to click that button there, and we've got the option, these two options. The second one allows me to actually publish these control account codes that we're seeing on this this breakdown structure here into the P6 system. So if I go there and click that now, it's going to ask me if I'd like to do it, and I'll say yes. So we'll sync to P6, and then on the right hand side we've got the queue and tells us the action is actually currently happening. And then once that's been completed, we'll get a green tick to say that it's been done. So now when we go to the P6 side of things, the planning team on that side will now have visibility of the cost codes and control account codes from Aconex Cost from within their P6 system. The first way is to literally apply a control account code to a specific activity. But if there's a huge amount of activities in the schedule and it becomes a burdensome effort for the scheduling side of the exercise, we can actually create summary activities in the P6 construct and link those to the physical execution activities, and then align the summary activities back to Aconex. Complete the process of connecting cost in Aconex through to time in P6. Once that's done and the baseline has been approved by the various stakeholders, we would then typically move to save that as the original approved baseline for connection back to the original budgets in Aconex. So over to you, Eben, for the P6 side of that.
Thank you for sending me the cost accounts, Alan. So let's go and look at the information that we have received. And here we can see the Aconex-ZA column that has been added to my view. And if I expand that, we can see our original project schedule. And now we can go ahead and look at the full cost account list that has been shared by Aconex to P6. Now, at this stage, I have the choice as a planner or a project manager to go and add those cost accounts to each one of my 1,000, 400,000 activities. But there's an easier way to show this and to utilize the summary activity level within P6. So what we now do is, let's go and add these summary activities to my schedule. And what we have created at this stage are two WBS summary activity levels, one for the substructure, and if I click onto that, you will see that the substructure activities are taking into consideration the foundation WBS within our schedule, and then there's also the superstructure summary activity that takes care of the structure part of the work breakdown structure. And what we are going to do now is, let's go scroll down to the bottom part of my schedule where I've got my design and engineering, and I've got 4 activities. Yes, it's easy to go and add the cost accounts to the 4 activities, but what happens if I've got 14,004 activities in here? So let's go and add in an activity in here. And detailed design, in this case you can go and look at the activity type, and there it is, WBS summary. So this is the activity type that we are going to select. Together with this, I also need to go and make sure that this is included in my summary task list. It's a summary WBS. So to assign my filters, remember I was using filters earlier, so I'm going to add it in, and I can assign multiple activity codes here. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to immediately assign the detailed design activity. There it is, detailed design. So there's my cost account. We haven't assigned the other 2 yet, but some of the other things that we need to go and do is we need to go and assign and look at the activities that's going to make up the start and the completion dates for that summary activity. Okay, so this one has been assigned. So we need to go and get the two cost accounts in here. Substructure. And we also need to get the superstructure assigned. All that is left now for us to do is we need to now schedule. There we have the information. The control accounts have been assigned. Let us go and show you only the summary activities that we have created for an easier view. So you can see the substructure summary. We've got the superstructure summary, and then right at the bottom we've got the detailed design summary activity. And we see that, our naming convention, we need to change something there. Let's just go and add in summary. There it is. And now what is left for us to do, we need to go and create a baseline. Let us save that, and we set that as the project baseline. And now what we can go and do is we can add in an extra bar. Let's go and add in 1 bar. I'm going to change that to a nice orange, and the bar type would be my project baseline. So let's save that. And once I now open up a project schedule, I can see that I've got my project cost accounts associated with my summary activities, and I've got my project baseline, and I can view my current project against my initial planning baseline. Over to you, Alan.
That's fantastic, Eben, thank you. So the next thing to do is to establish some monetary values, or indeed quantities or hours, against the breakdown structure and the control accounts that we defined at the outset of this exercise. So back to Aconex, where we have the familiar structure that we left off earlier. We've got our breakdown of work defined, but we don't have any budgetary values from a cost or quantity or hours perspective against these control accounts yet. So again, we can do that one by one on the fly, but it's just easier to import our elemental costs into the system. And we can import that. Again, we get a successful flag on the top right. And now we can see that we've got some dollar values against each of these key areas and scope accounts. The original budget and current budget at this point in time are equal because it's the start of the project and we haven't yet had any modifications or changes to the project budget. So they are, for the time being, one and the same. So that's that complete. But as you can see, we don't yet have any time-based parameters against these control accounts yet because we haven't actually brought that part of it across. So the next obvious piece then is to essentially bring the schedule activities from P6 into Aconex cost. And again, using the pre-built integration between the two Oracle-owned products, it's a relatively simple exercise because the mapping has already been configured and constructed and assigned on the P6 side. So to bring it into Aconex is quite straightforward. So before we sync the activities in, it's worth having a quick look at the administration section to see what the configuration options are for bringing the data across from P6. If we go to the schedule integration piece at the bottom, you can see that we're talking to this particular project in P6, which is fine. And so far we've only configured the ability to push the control account codes into P6. If we now switch on the option for import activities, these are the dates that we're going to bring across, which is great. And we're going to change this setting from all activities to summary activities only, because those are the ones that Eben configured on the P6 side. So that's now been set. If we now then go to cost management, and if we then go to schedule activities, we can see that right now we don't have any activities in the system. So then we just go down to the run schedule integration option, configure to bring activities across only, and we hit the sync data button. Aconex then goes away to Primavera P6, pulls across all of the summary activities into the tool, and then we can see those being displayed here. We're showing just the original start date and finish date in this particular view, but then if I switch this to the standard user view, we get to see all of the date parameters that have come from P6. And obviously right now we only have one set of dates, so they're all currently the same. And then we can look at this in the control accounts now to see how this has been assigned. So now in the cost worksheet, we can see that a couple of these control accounts have got some basic date parameters around those. So for detailed design, we've got some dates there now, and for substructure and superstructure, because these codes were connected to the corresponding summary activity on the P6 side. So now if we click on the detailed design control account, we have the basic elemental feed here, which is an element of design cost for 2.4 million. And if we then move to the schedule activities piece here, we can see that this summary activity from P6 has now been connected to this control account. So that code has now been connected, it's there forever, and obviously any changes that go forward in time will start to synchronize automatically into the activity here, along with the progress, percent complete, and duration, and so on. So that's how we bring it across. And now with the time-based parameters connected to the cost, we can actually move forward to the next part of the process, and that's to essentially make sure that we're happy with the distribution curves that we're going to use to spread those cost, quantity, and hours data values over the schedule-based time parameters. So back in Aconex cost, let's go and collapse the breakdown structure, and we're going to modify the view now to show our phase and forecasting view, which has been pre-configured, and it's one of our organizational standards. Now we can actually go into this in a bit more detail, and we can see now how each of our individual budgets with the corresponding curves have been configured from a time phasing perspective, along with the forecasting and the forecasting methodology. So there's a lot of configuration options in the tool, giving the user a lot of pre-configured industry standards based forecasting methodologies. And in terms of distribution spreads, these curves can be pre-configured and defined by yourselves with ease in the administration section of the tool itself. So if we collapse this and go to the design, for example, we can see that we've got now some dollar values against detailed design. We know that we've got some time-based components against this as well. So there's the activity seen against it, and we've got this dollar value. So now we can actually talk about the physical distribution, because it shows that we're going to spread 2.4 million over a linear spread for these various budget curves that are sitting here right now. So logically, the next thing to do is to look at the phasing, and that's the next step. When you time phase an Aconex cost, it automatically spreads all of the data sets. And from a configuration perspective, we have the option to go over to time phase data. And if you look at this, this will show the basic table. So already the forecasting values have been spread, because that's an auto spread. We've got the start of the project here from a monthly period perspective through to the end of the project. And we've got the current values of 2.4 and 2.4 for original current budgets, respectively. So if I wanted to spread that value, I'd simply go to Utilities, Spread Time Phase Data. I can do the entire project at once, or I can just pick out the detailed design section here and just spread that one, enable these boxes, and hit the spread button. And now we'll see that the 2.4 has been distributed over time based on the schedule activities and against this distribution curve that was configured for original budget. If I was to change that now to bell-shaped as an example, and then just do the spread again, a very simple way of doing this, and spread that, we can now see that those dollar values will change in line with the distribution curve that's been configured at this level by ourselves. So a lot of granular control, and then these time phase data tables for each control account feed up to the overall reports in the cost management section, which we'll go to quickly. And we've got our data sets on the left hand side, and if we just select the time phase data, we're going to get a default report that gives us a view of all the costs over time. Now we've only just spread one control account for the time being, so there's a huge volume of unassigned monetary value here. So we might just go to the filter section and actually decide to spread, to view only the design part of it, and that will give us a more filtered view specifically of design, and that's the spread there between original budget, current budget, and the actuals stroke forecasted remaining to spend, along with the curves out to the future. So that is quite a very simple way, with the individual time phase data table per control account and the curves available, and then the reports to validate the distribution so that the project controls manager is happy with what he's seeing from a cost and distribution perspective. So that wraps up the phase of planning and approval baseline, getting everything into the system and getting it baselined and ready to go. The next typical scenario that would happen on a project is a change of some description that affects either the schedule and or cost at the same time. Because we're jumping ahead in this sequence, just going to make a couple of assumptions. First, that there's been a change in either a cost or a quantity or an hours data set in Aconex cost, and that a change in the schedule needs to occur, needs to be assessed. So the first part of that, of course, will be the assessment, a couple of what-if scenarios, approval, and then running the approved schedule. So just to talk through that, Eben, that's over to you again.
Our owner organization has just requested significant structural changes to the building, and it requires us to redesign the foyer of the building addition. And what we as planners can do is we can go and look at the potential impact, do a what if, and then submit that what if scenario with a change of completion dates to the owner organization. They will then either approve or ask for more changes. So in this case, let's say they have approved a 2-week delay in the design. So what we can do is either put in a constraint if we need to move the activities out, or in this case what we are going to do is just move it out by a 2-week period. Save this, and we can immediately see what the impact is on the original approved baseline. So let's reschedule this, and then we are going to re-baseline and add in an additional baseline bar to our project schedule. So there we can see, once we've done it, we can see that everything has moved out, even up to the top. Let's just zoom this in that you can see this. So it's moved out our design. It's also moved out some of our others. You can see that the changes are 2 weeks overall.
Thanks, Eben, that's great. So whilst that's happening on the P6 side of the fence, the cost person or the cost QS, commercial guy in Aconex cost would be evolving a change event to understand the cost impact of that particular change on the project plan. So back into Aconex cost, the view has changed again to this one here called change summary, which allows us to see original committed budget with plus or minus approved budget changes to equals our current budget, and then plus any potential budget changes or transfers equals our potential budget on the budget side, and then our internal costs and targets with their potential changes over here as well. So as you can see, everything from a potential change or approved change perspective is currently 0. If we go over to look at change events, we can see that a change event has already been entered into the system. So there's only one showing at this point in time. We don't have any contracts established in the tool as yet. So this is purely a budget and internal estimate to complete discussion. So this one change has currently got 2 line items, one for a budget change, one for an ETC change. If is all approved, then we end up with a positive 61,600. Against this change event, we've got some contractual documentation that's been linked from the Aconex document register into the event itself, and there's also some narrative from a couple of colleagues that have been involved in this to date, so we've got a good understanding. If we set the status of the change here from planning to potential, then that will carry the status down to potential for here, and then going back to the cost work, we can see now against the detailed design control account, we've got a potential budget change of 150, making our potential budget 2.5, and we've got a potential FCC change of 88,000, making a potential FFC slightly higher as well. So that's the plan. I, as the cost engineer, I'm going to look at that. I can produce a change event pack from the change event, so back to that now. From the change event itself, I can now go to download PDF and create a nice custom built PDF ready for submission to the owner or to the internal management for approval. And then once that's been approved, we would set that status to approved in the system, which is great. And then going back to the change event, it allows me to say this status here is approved. And again, we can use the workflows module to actually control this as a proper routed structure. But if we set the status to update, then we see the status for both of these is now approved. And now going back to the cost worksheet, we can see that the potential budget change has gone back to 0 with the approved budget change here, and the potential forecast cost of complete change to 0 with the approved increase now sitting as part of our new final forecast cost. So now we have a new number for our current budget of 2.550 million. If we switch the views back to our phase and forecast view, as we used earlier, and we select the detailed design control account, we can go back to our time phase data table, and we can see now that the new value of 150,000 has yet to be spread. So because that's an increase, we need to redistribute that over time. When we do this, all that's going to happen is that the 2.55 million is going to be distributed over the existing schedule dates. But of course, there may have been a change on the schedule side. So I can rephase this now using those existing dates. But we're going to jump a step and go and actually see if there's been an update by resynchronizing the schedule. And typically, on the scheduling side, we would have seen that the assessment of that schedule has now been approved and moved through to a new current approved baseline. So let's just take a quick look at that in P6.
And what I can go and do now is I can go and define a new baseline. So customer sign-off baseline. So the project baseline now becomes the new approved baseline. I am going to stick to the original baseline. And what I now can do is I can go and add in an extra bar. So we can see now that the project baseline and the current project are exactly the same. And this was the original baseline, and we can also see where what the impact is on this. Over to you, Alan.
Okay, so now there's an updated current baseline sitting in P6. We can now go across to the Aconex cost, and again, we can run the schedule integration to do the update in the background. We don't need to worry about checking anything. It's all been configured and connected. So now we can actually, obviously if we go across now, that will update. And if we now look at schedule activities, we can see now that the dates have modified for the current. So the original start, original finish have stayed the same. They're connected to the original baseline. Then current start and the current finish are connected to the new currently approved baseline, and of course then that changes the forecast dates to be exactly the same as well. So then if we switch back to the time phase data table now, and just a validation of where we are in the flow, we can see now that we've pulled the updated activities through from P6 into Aconex without modifying the original dates, which is important. And now we just need to rephase the time phase data. Now, one of the things that you would see here is that the remaining to spend line has automatically rephased itself because that's set to auto distribute in Aconex cost. But the current budget line here still needs to be spread manually. So I'll do a spread just at this control account only. So again, as earlier, we just find the detailed design control account there, tick that. And now when we spread that, we're going to find the 150,000 goes into the new distribution, and of course the actual timeline changes because this is now pointing to the currently approved baseline in P6 that my colleague Eben just updated for me. So now we're seeing a new distribution there. So we're now being able to plot or start the basis of a plot on a per period basis between original and current budgets with our forecasted remaining to spend as well in this period, which is January 2021, currently in the system. So with everything planned, the project gets underway, and now we would start to look at how we capture progress within the respective systems. A timeline assumption for this part of the demo is that multiple actuals have been captured in Aconex cost, not just schedule % complete, but also quantities installed, labor hours performed, and deliverables have been measured against rules of credit. So we'll show you that in a second. But first, let's have a quick look at how the schedule has progressed from an activity perspective, if you wouldn't mind, Eben.
We are now ready to share the update, so we need to capture actuals, and by doing that we can use the progress spotlight. In our case, if we just zoom in again, is to go and look at some of the activities that we need to update. And once we have updated that, we can go and progress the activities, and that information will then be used by Aconex.
Thanks, Eben. So now that we've got the activity status in the schedule, the next thing to do would be to then take that information and pull that across into Aconex cost. Just to make things a bit quicker, I've already gone and run the schedule integration in the background, as we've seen it a few times now, and the percentage of 8.5% for the complete has come through from P6. That's current percent complete. Previous percent is currently 0 because we haven't yet closed any reporting periods, and we're still in the first period of the project. So that's 0 for now, but the current is 8.5%, as you can see. So that's another part of the P6 synchronization into Aconex, and now we can actually go in and start to look at the progress from other variables as well. Right, so back into Aconex, and we just left the system measuring the 8.5% complete from the activity, and we had this view from a phasing and forecasting perspective. But now that activity is starting to progress and things are happening on the project, we're going to go to a new view, again one that we've configured from earlier, and we're going to select progress. And this takes us to a slightly more wider project controls discussion now. So first and foremost, on the right hand side is the current percent complete as a percentage, and that's a value that's driven by the method of measurement that we're choosing on the project, or for that particular control account. So for detailed design, where we've been working for most of this demonstration, we've set the percent complete method as composite schedule activities percent complete. In other words, whatever the schedule is telling us is what we're going to use to drive the progress. So because that's 8.5%, or the aggregation of these based on the weighting is 8.5%, but again, because we're summarizing multiple activities on the P6 side into one activity into Aconex using summaries, we wouldn't need to have more than one per control account in theory, if that's the philosophy we're going to use. So if 8.5% complete here, the earned period and earned to date, because we're in the first period, we haven't closed anything yet, so that's the same value, is showing that 8.5% of the current budget of 2.55 million equals 216,750 bucks. And that's how the earned number is calculated, always from the current budget. But if we go across, then we can see there are some physical dollar actuals against this control account of detailed design. So according to this, we spent 220,000 to date. And if we look at the elements view against this, we can see all of the actuals that have been rolled up so far cumulatively and period against this control account. The percent spent of 9.48% means that we've spent literally that percentage of our final forecast cost, which is our target number that we're looking to spend internally. That's the target we're going for. But we've been invoiced for 44% of the total contract commitments against this this control account. So the approved contract actuals of 220 means that we've paid some money out against the contract commitments to a total of 44%. So it's a really easy way for the project controls and the QSs to work out the amount of money that has been invoiced versus the amount of money that's been spent so far versus the amount of money that's been earned. So if the contractual supplier is asking for more than you are measuring independently, this is the first place to see that alarm bell going off. So when you look at the time phase data table and we look at the spreads, we're able now to see a relatively interesting picture. The original budget was expected to be quite low because we used a bell curve distribution back a long time ago now. The current budget that we expected to spend was there. The actuals that we actually spent are there, and the value that we earned is there, 216,000, and then the forecast remaining to spend is obviously spread as well. So because we've now got these different data plots against each data set in the time phase data table, now when we go to the variance analysis section on the menu on the left hand side here, we can look at the earned value metrics rolled up to the top of the project here, and we can also then in real time drill down into more detail into each of the nodes. Now obviously for these ones we haven't done a great deal, so they're empty, as is this one. But if we go over then to design, we can see that at this node we've got a bit of interesting metric happening. And if we expand that, we can then go into each of the control accounts one by one and see what's happening. So there are the various metrics based on the defined in the view up here. So this is the current view that I've got, and this is my ability to configure my various percentage or values thresholds to give me my red, green, and yellow color coding for the earned value metrics that. Okay, that's the end of that demonstration. I hope everyone was able to hold on for that. Any questions?
Thanks, Alan. I see there's one question which I haven't answered from Terence, asking about workflow. Do you want to deal with it now, or do you want to make contact with Terence directly and step him through that? I know it's quite a lengthy discussion.
Yeah, I don't think that's a quick discussion. It's we're going to go through workflows. We're going to talk about templates and defining the process, pumping it through, statusing. I think it will, yeah. I think it's probably better if we can just get a quick 10 minutes online with Terence directly and just go through that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I see you've answered all the other questions in the chat. I know